Buongiorno, everybody, and welcome! Thank you for coming all the way to Juniper 4, is it 4? And hearing for the next 25 minutes about what it means to sign out in 2023. And I like that I have this stuff so I can hide if you throw me things. Here's the deal. Sign out is really the Cinderella of those flows because it doesn't make for a very good demo. Like usually you just go, you do your sign-in demo, everything works, and good, we go to lunch. But sign out is one of the things that are the most consequential from the security perspective. And there is an issue with all that, which is in order to get sign out, you need to get into the details. Unless you like magical thinking, you say, well, stuff happens and sign out, then you really do need to sweat the details. And almost no one likes to do it, again, because whenever. So today, I'm going to do a deal with you. I have enough content for a much longer presentation, which we don't have the time for this. It's still doable to do it within the time, and I spent countless hours at bars in airports with drinks to do lots of visualizations that will help you visualize what happens when you do sign out. And so if you actually pay attention, undivided attention, for the next 20 minutes, I promise you'll walk out with knowledge that a lot of people don't have in this space, not because it's a secret, but because it's boring, so boring. So I try to put like a little color, and so hopefully it will help. And I know that the temptation of social media, the allure of Tinder, is very strong. But if you give me 20 minutes of attention, I promise you'll walk out with useful, actionable knowledge on sign out. Deal? Deal. Great. So that's me. And this is the only time in which I show my Twitter. And if you don't write it down right now, I will be sorry. Too late. And also my lawyers advise me to tell you that don't believe anything I say. No, well, not exactly. It's that if I say forward statements about products, those are just statements. It's not a commitment. As an Italian man, I'm familiar with the concept. So it's a stereotype. Now, also, I'm not going to talk about product at all. I'm only going to talk about the topic. OK, let's do this. So first, we're going to clarify what we mean by the various terms. They have intuitive meaning, and intuition is powerful, but not universal. Then we are going to look at how sign out works today, for the time being. And in the meanwhile, we'll do commentary on how it will stop working because of our friends, the browser vendors. And then we'll look at alternatives, how you can actually maintain the ability to do distributed sign out in a hostile world in which the browsers really try to block you from doing so. And then we'll do looking ahead. But probably I will have run out of time for that, so you'll be left wondering. Very good. Sign out. To me, a session, it just happens to be the time during which a user have access to a resource, and they are not prompted for anything. So it's a time interval during which you can access your stuff and not be prompted for it. And as a corollary, it's also the stuff that makes this thing possible. So cookies, tokens, and stuff like that. You might differ. You might have a different definition. This is the definition we are using today. How does it happen that we sign in? Well, I have a browser, I have an identity provider, I have a relying party, a website. I land on my website says you've got to be authenticated. You get redirected to my identity provider using whatever protocol you want. SAML if you are old-fashioned, OpenID if you're spunky and modern, or otherwise, whatever you want to do, the outcome is always the same. It's a cookie that says, yeah, you're signed in this domain, and an assertion for the relying party, which you send, and that gets validated in the wonderful ways that Aaron just told you about, and turns into a cookie. So now I am signed in. My definition of sign out here is the act of terminating this session that allows you to access your resource. And here the trick is there are two sessions. And so sometimes people will refer to one or to the other, and you need to look for the context. But usually, the main session that they mean is the IDP session. It's the one from where all the other sessions stem. So here, I hit the page with a button that says sign out. relying party 1 owns its domain, gets rid of its own cookie, and then uses some standard, I said some standard, to go to the IDP and ask to sign out. And basically, the IDP just gets rid of its own cookies, and now homeostasis. We are back to square one. We are signed out. That's the easy stuff. Now, what does it mean to do distributed sign out, single logout? Infinite discussions about semantics of whether you should do sign out or log out. Don't care. Let's use whatever. The idea is that I want to do sign out, as we just defined it, plus signing out from every other relying party I might have signed in as part of that IDP session. So here we are in a situation in which we just signed in with relying party 1. Let's say I want to do the famous single sign-on with relying party 2. So I hit relying party 2 sends me back to the IDP, and this time I have a cookie that says I'm already signed in. So no prompt, apart from special cases, send the assertion or the token for relying party 2, and I get my third token. So single sign-on. And now, distributed single sign-out. It starts like before, in which I just hit my relying party, ask to sign out, go back to the IDP, do my sign out. But on top of this, now, we'll see that there are different techniques. But one easy technique is the IDP keeps track of all the relying parties I visited, sends me an iframe, which points to the RP2 domain, hence have access to that cookie. And so once it hits it, basically, RP2 is empowered to get rid of that cookie. That is distributed sign-out. Not that hard, right? Did you miss Slack? Did you miss email in these 5 minutes that elapsed? Today, things are unfortunately more complicated. Like, most of the protocols that you see about sign-out are about web, but there's more to web than this. One basic thing is very often the thing that signs you in is just an intermediary, a federation provider that sends you to a real IDP that also has a cookie, and that you might need to get rid of. You might need to propagate your sign-out. And there is no standard way of doing this, because you don't know what protocol is between IDP-COM and IDP2. Like, IDP2 might be Facebook, which is not very keen on you logging out ever. So it's kind of like tricky. The other part is that in today's modern, brave world, we have APIs. APIs that also get access as resources, and also we want to have the ability to have continuous access. So we have refresh tokens, which we typically save somewhere there. In that scenario, I'm calling an API from a backend. I might have a refresh token in there, and this refresh token is part of the user. Am I still here? Should I project? To access a resource. And unfortunately, today, we have no standards for actually telling the system, get rid of the token. And guess what? Those tokens are everywhere. If you have a single page app in the JavaScript, you might have that stuff. If you have a mobile client, you might also have refresh tokens. So I will not talk about refresh tokens anymore from now on, but I just wanted you to be aware that what we are doing is a subset of all the stuff that we are normally doing. OK, so now let's see a bit in more details how today's sign-out techniques work. I just want to mention very briefly that SAML also have logout, but I don't want to go into the details because, one, they are not very affected by the third-party cookies demise. And the other is that it's crazy how you do it. Like, basically, they tell one relying party to sign out and say, and please, can you tell your friend to also sign out? And so you do like this telephone game, and guess what? Like, on a good day, sign out is best effort. It's not a two-phase transaction. And with this thing, it's just like if you are religious, hoping to your God and similar. So I'm not going to mention SAML sign out at all, but I am instead going into the details of two flavors of OpenID sign out. One is front channel, and the other is session management. I realize I can also look there, so you don't have to see this side, which is not my best side. So front channel logout, here I'm basically redoing the same thing I've shown earlier, but with more details. Say that I am pointing to relying party 1, and I'm signed in relying party 1. And say that I do my sign out, and then I get propagated to the IDP using, again, assuming this time the front channel logout, which is like a specific syntax that OpenID describes on how to actually go back to the IDP and request a sign out. I sign out, and here you might notice that the moment in which I hit the idp.com domain, the cookies that I had for that domain go up. And so one way in which you can keep track of the relying parties that are part of this is to save their addresses in the cookie. It's just one way. You could have had just an identifier in the cookie and have server-side state on the IDP. Same stuff. So just want to make sure that you don't walk out thinking it's part of a standard. How you save that list is completely up to you. And then at this point, I send back this iframe, which points to the logout of relying party 2, and then the fact that the cookie is there makes it possible for me to ask for a sign out. And here comes the problem. I won't go into the details here because we have no time. But one of the things that browser vendors have been doing in the last few years is to block the ability of scenarios like this to access cookies that are not of the domain of the top level. So the idea is that very often this trick is not used for sending sign-out messages, but it's used for tracking the user, like sending information about the page that the user is visiting so that you can build a dossier about the user and then give them ads. And of course, it's like a privacy violation, and browsers aren't happy about it. And so the thing that they thought they could do is to block those scenarios. So those cookies, when they live inside a domain which is not the top-level domain, is in this circumstance, they are considered third-party cookies. And so basically, the browser will block the ability to access this cookie. And so this segment will no longer be possible. If you are using Safari today, you can already not do this. And today, the typical thing is like, dear customer, download Chrome and use Chrome. But Chrome wants to do the same. And very soon, I think they actually said the date, but I don't remember it. Do you remember the date, Heather? OK, good. They keep moving it. Let's hope that they will keep moving it. But anyway, this trick will no longer work. Now, there is this other technique, which is called session management, which is also defined by the OpenID Foundation set of specs, which relies on opening an iframe, and this time pointing this iframe to the IDP domain. And the idea is that in whatever tab you are, if you have this iframe, you can use HTML5 APIs, in particular post message, which don't even hit the network. They just probe the iframe and say, hey, do you have a cookie for this domain? And while the cookie is there, you consider the user signed in. So now think of what happens. I hit my relying party, and I sign out, so I get rid of my own cookie. Then I go to the IDP, and now the IDP gets rid of its own cookie. I missed the moment in which we're taking a picture. Damn it. And at this point, the JavaScript in here will perceive the fact that, oh, OK, wait, I have a second chance. JavaScript will perceive the fact that the cookie is gone, and so it will sign out the user also from there. And this method has the advantage of being viable also for single-page apps, stuff that don't have server-side component, because all the logic is on the client. However, it has huge issues on trying to package it in an SDK, which is why I bugged those guys to death until they did the front channel logout. I am claiming part of responsibility for that, because I couldn't package these in an SDK in a clean way. However, as you can guess, this thing will also stop working, because iframe, third-party cookies. So this will not be a viable way of signing out moving forward. And of course, like here, I won't go into the details. You'll see these once you get the PDF. But as I said earlier, there are no tricks for getting rid of refresh tokens yet. And the other is like for single-page apps, either you play with iframes or some of the tricks that I will show you will not actually apply. So we are not in a great place right now. OK, modern approaches. here, just for exhaustiveness, I'll mention that you can do some tricks to blow new life into these old methods. Like, for example, if you have just one extra relying party that you want to sign out from, you can use CNAMEs for having rp2.com and idp.com to be only one domain. If you can do that, then at that point, all of your cookies are no longer third-party cookies. And so front channel and session will keep working. Very brittle, because typically you have many relying parties, one. And two, Apple isn't particularly keen on this method, and they occasionally, passively aggressively, or aggressively, threaten to actually block this method. And then there are other things like new APIs, and I won't bore you with politics, but it's not looking very good. So here, there is a method that actually works, and doesn't care about the things that the browser vendors are throwing at us, but it has some challenges of its own. This thing is the third method that OpenID defined for logging out, which is backchannel logout. And the way it works is, as usual, I hit my relying party 1 in the front channel. I don't need any third-party cookies. I go back to my IDP and say, hey, I want to log out. And here there is the new part. Now I'm basically contacting my other relying parties on their server side. Instead of going through the browser, I'm actually hitting their server side with one new artifact, which, with not a lot of fantasy, we called the sign out token. It smells like the ID token, but isn't quite. And this thing carries this all-important information, which is the identifier of the session, which is basically the identifier which is assigned to every cookie which is part of that family of sessions. And so what happens is that now we write down on the server side that identifier, and that is the only thing we can do, because the cookie, the artifact represents the session, is in the browser, but we don't see the browser at this point. We are doing a server-to-server interaction. So all we can do is to write down that thing and wait. And the next time that someone shows up in there, they say, aha, here you are. Let me look at your cookie. Same identifier. OK. And then you just get rid of this cookie, and now you are logged out. So this is an interesting method. It's very powerful. It has this little thing that your relying party needs to be stateful, which is not great. I mean, like most websites that are worth their salt, they usually have some way of saving data. So here, that would just be an extra table. But to be fair, not everyone. Like if you are just doing a Lambda and you are completely stateless, then this method is going to be tricky. OK, tomorrow, there is going to be a great session from Tim Cappali, and Atul can never pronounce his surname, even after 3 years of knowing him, having him as a guest in my podcast. I apologize. It's Atul. And they are going to talk about the shared signal framework, which is a very powerful initiative within the OpenID Foundation, which basically strives to find ways to spread important signals, to use events to inform different nodes in an architecture of relevant security events, like, for example, user changed password. And you could use that mechanism also for doing distributed sign-out. And if you have a use for the value proposition that the thing has, it's a great method. The main thing that is kind of like a powerful thing to implement, like implementing an entire event bus just for sign-out, might be like not commensurate to the effort that you're trying to do. So I'm putting it there as a FYI, and if you actually go to the session tomorrow, you learn more about how to use it for this particular scenario. And so also for not stealing their thunder, and not because I'm lazy, I don't have anything about it. So looking ahead, you might have ignored this until now, and if you are not doing distributed sign-out, you might be able to keep ignoring it, but I'd be surprised. I think that the moment in which Chrome will seriously stop using third-party cookies, then a flurry of calls to your call centers will show up with people saying, hey, try to log out, didn't. So would be good to be on top of this as soon as you can. And also, if you are a heavy user of APIs and you have fresh tokens lying around, that is also food for thought for you to think about how to manage this. So here, if you want a suggestion on what to do in practice, I'd say that first, spend some time to figure out how you are using sessions in your organization, which protocols you are using, which products you are using, what's the roadmap of those products, and all of that. Then actually do some pilots, like again, here there's some timing, but of course, you do you. Do some pilots so that you can actually experience with your own people, like your own teams, the technology choices that you made, the products that you're using, and basically see what can be done about it. Be on top of this, because if you wait until the last moment, then you will probably be forced to do something ugly just to keep things running without the possibility of instead doing a good, nice, planned rollout. And I'm ready for your questions. Yes, sir.
So in the diagram, we have depicted IDP as a single component, but there can be authorization server which can be totally independent and out of IDP. So that will change the whole scenario.
So the question is, what if that Indigo thing is not an IDP, but it's an authorization server? Well, the authorization server is like a lower level construct that says this is how I talk to this endpoint. The IDP is the job. So if you want to be strict, that thing should be OpenID and not off. But the thing is, if this thing produces a cookie, and this cookie is used for making determinations on whether the user can sign in or not, whether the user should be prompted or not, then all the things that I said here apply. If instead the authorization server is there just for authorizing, issuing access tokens, for calling APIs, and nothing else, then this thing does not apply.
But single sign-on and a single logout are the two contradictory things. If there is an enterprise, I got 50 applications, I log on without any login prompt coming up again and again. And one application wants to log out. And if I log out all other applications, there may be an active session and active conversation going on. It disrupts the flow. So is there any standard that is coming up so that the IDP manage the session cookies for each SP separately rather than one session cookie for IDP?
So if I understand correctly, the question is, I have a large number of relying parties, and I don't want to hit the EM pulse and nuke them all. I want to nuke some, but preserve some others. Well, this standard doesn't really go into the details of how you save those things. And as you use products will represent the various relying parties in their own way. They will have their own features, such as, for example, I want a sliding session, which is not defined in the standard. Just like you have that, you can have a feature that say, I want you to be impervious to sign-out requests. So it's not as much of a matter of a standard, it's more of the way in which you configure the product that you're using, and if the product offers that feature, then you can use this feature. Also note that relying parties don't have to participate into this. Let's say that you receive your first token, and once you create, like even in the scenario that I described there, if I don't configure the endpoint where I receive the sign-out token, no sign-out token will ever reach me. Or I can just create a cookie of fixed length and ignore everything else, which a lot of people do for many reasons. Like certain apps don't need to be tied to the IDP. I hope that answered. Yes, sir. Justin.
Okay. So in recent years, we've seen the sign-on side go away from a single event and more to a continuous process. Do you foresee a similar change happening to the sign-on?
Justin projected, so I assume that you just heard his question. It's a very interesting point. I think that just like, I'm being rated and the rate is 0. Just as like a sign-in is now a fluid concept, it's more of like every time you show up, there is a risk assessment of whether you deserve to be still served or if I need to prompt you. Yes, I think that in the end, sign in and sign out might just blend into a continuum in which, unless there are like true emergencies, like, yes, this user password has been compromised, so please terminate all sessions. In the day-to-day, I think that it's a very valid concern. Thank you. Very good question. I have 0 time, so I hope that this was as valuable as I promised, and I'll see you around.